The clinking of silverware and the soft hum of voices filled the restaurant, but at our table, silence sat heavier than the dim candle between us. I had chosen this place carefully. A quiet corner, away from the chatter, the perfect setting for a long-awaited dinner with my son. It had been years since we last sat across from one another like this, and even then, our words had been few, sharp, and cold. Tonight was meant to be different, or so I had hoped. He sat with his shoulders back, chin lifted, confidence radiating from every gesture. His suit was expensive, tailored to perfection, the watch on his wrist glinting with every flick of his hand. His smile was sharp, almost smug, the kind of smile that carried both triumph and disdain. I studied him quietly, taking in the man he had become. My son, my blood. Yet in that moment he felt like a stranger. "You've aged," he said finally, swirling the wine in his glass before taking a slow sip. His tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, like a blade sliding just close enough to nick the skin. "You look tired, worn out." I managed a small smile. Time has a way of doing that to us all. He chuckled softly, but it wasn't a laugh of affection. It was sharp mocking. "Not to everyone. Some of us manage to rise above it, make something of ourselves." The waiter arrived with our meals, placing the plates delicately before us. The scent of roasted meat and rich sauces filled the air, but my appetite was nowhere to be found. I lifted my fork, more out of habit than hunger, and forced myself to take a small bite. "You always did love fine dining?" I said, attempting to bridge the silence again. "I remember when you were little, how your eyes lit up when I managed to take you out for pizza, even though it meant skipping my own meal for the week." His eyes flickered for just a second. Was it guilt or just irritation? Before the smirk returned, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and shook his head. "You really haven't changed, have you? Still clinging to those sad little stories of sacrifice, as if starving yourself for me was some grand achievement. You think that excuses everything." The words hit harder than I expected. I took a breath, steadying myself, refusing to let him see the sting in my chest. It wasn't about achievement, it was about love. Love. He scoffed, setting his glass down with a thud. "Don't make me laugh. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't get you anywhere. Look at you." His hand gestured toward me, dismissive and cold. "You have nothing. No career, no wealth, no success. You wasted your life, and for what? To sit here, in front of me, trying to convince yourself you mattered." His laughter echoed, sharp and cruel, slicing through the quiet murmur of the restaurant. A few diners turned their heads, but quickly returned to their meals, pretending not to notice. I sat frozen, my fork still in hand, staring at the boy I had raised, the man who now mocked me without hesitation. For a moment, my throat tightened and I thought I might break. Years of struggle, of working 2 jobs, of sleepless nights worrying about him, all of it rose like a wave, threatening to crash. But then something inside me shifted. His words, meant to wound, sparked a flame instead. My grip on the fork loosened and I set it gently onto the plate. I lifted my eyes to meet his, steady and unwavering. "You're right," I said softly, my voice calm but laced with steel. "I have nothing, nothing you can see, no mansion, no fortune, no flashy watch. But what I do have," I leaned forward, my gaze locked on his, "is the truth. And the truth, my son, is far heavier than any gold you wear." His smile faltered. Just slightly, but he masked it with another laugh. "Truth? What truth? Don't tell me you've been holding on to some secret all these years, some fantasy to make yourself feel less like a failure." I held his stare, letting the silence stretch just long enough for him to shift uncomfortably in his chair. "You've built your life on arrogance, on forgetting where you came from, on mocking the very sacrifices that carried you here. But you've forgotten something, Daniel." My voice dropped lower, each word deliberate. "You've forgotten who I am." For the first time that evening, his confidence wavered. He straightened in his chair, narrowing his eyes, studying me as though seeing me for the first time. I leaned back, calm now, almost serene. "You think I have nothing. But you'll learn. My son, nothing is far more dangerous than you realize." The flicker of unease in his eyes told me I had pierced through his shield of arrogance. He tried to laugh it off, tried to shake his head as if I was just a foolish old man grasping at drama. But I saw it. The seed of doubt. The question he couldn't silence. And in that moment, I knew the game had only just begun. The restaurant's soft candlelight flickered, throwing shadows across his sharp features. Daniel leaned back in his chair, trying to mask the sudden unease behind a smug grin. He twirled the stem of his wineglass between his fingers, pretending to be unfazed, but I could see it. The tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes darted to me and then away. "Dangerous," he finally said, laughing, though his voice cracked ever so slightly. "You think you're dangerous? Old man, you've lived your whole life scraping by, a nobody. Don't sit there and act like you've been holding some kind of power over me all these years. I stayed quiet, watching him, letting his words spill like cheap liquor. Loud, bitter, and empty. Silence has a weight, and I made sure he felt every ounce of it pressing down. He hated silence. He always had. Even as a child, if the house grew too quiet, he would stir up chaos just to fill the void. Some things, it seemed, never changed. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Power, I said softly, almost to myself. Funny thing about power, Daniel, it's not always about what you own. Sometimes, it's about what you know. His brow furrowed just for a second before he forced another scoff. What could you possibly know that matters? I run a company that makes more in a day than you did in a lifetime. I dine with investors, politicians, you. He gestured with his glass again. You sit in your tiny apartment, clinging to memories and lies. I let him finish, let him drain his bitterness like venom from a snake. Then I smiled. A small, patient smile. Do you remember your first job interview? He blinked, caught off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember who prepared your resume? I pressed, tilting my head. He shifted in his seat. Well, you helped, I guess. So what? Helped? I chuckled. Daniel, I wrote it. Every word. I stayed up all night crafting it while you slept. I called in favors, spoke to people you'll never know I spoke to, just to make sure you got that chance. And when you walked into that interview, you carried my words, my effort, not your own. He clenched his jaw, gripping the wine glass tighter. That doesn't mean anything. I got that job on my own merit. Did you? I let the question hang. Or did you build your empire on the foundation I quietly laid for you? The silence stretched again, heavier this time. He didn't answer. Couldn't. His pride wouldn't let him admit it, but the truth had scratched the surface. I leaned back, folding my arms. You laugh and say I have nothing. But without my nothing, Daniel, you would never have had anything. Every step you took forward, I was the wind at your back, invisible, unthanked, unseen. You wear success like armor, but it's rusting, and you know why. Because arrogance eats through metal faster than time. His eyes darkened. The mask of confidence was cracking, piece by piece. He slammed the glass onto the table, making the cutlery rattle. Enough, he snapped, his voice low but shaking with anger. You think I owe you everything. You think I should bow down and thank you for being a mediocre father who happened to push me in the right direction. I leaned in again, my voice a whisper sharp as a blade. Not everything. Just the truth. And that's the one thing you fear most. His breath caught, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who once clung to my hand, who cried when he fell off his bicycle, who whispered that he didn't want me to leave when nightmares woke him at night. That boy was buried now under layers of pride, greed, and resentment, but for a flicker of a second, he surfaced. The waiter returned to clear the plates, sensing the storm between us but too professional to comment. I thanked him quietly, my eyes never leaving Daniel's face. He avoided my gaze, busying himself with his phone, pretending he had better things to do than sit here with me. But I wasn't finished, not yet. You asked me what I have, I said once the waiter left. I'll tell you, I have patience. I have memory. And I have the kind of silence that can unravel even the loudest man. He looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing. Are you threatening me? I smiled faintly. No, Daniel, I don't need to threaten. I simply remind. And reminders have a way of haunting us more than threats ever could. He stared at me, and for the first time in years he didn't have a comeback. His mouth opened, then closed, his jaw tight, his pride fighting for a response. But none came. The silence, that heavy silence, swallowed him whole. And in that silence, I knew this was only the beginning. The restaurant felt smaller now, the walls pressing closer with every passing second. Daniel shifted in his seat, restless, as though the chair beneath him burned hotter than the candles flickering on our table. His fingers tapped against his phone, but he wasn't typing. He was pretending, hiding, buying himself a moment of control that was slipping further and further away. I leaned back, letting him stew in that silence, the kind that gnawed at him like invisible teeth. For years he had spoken louder, walked taller, laughed harsher, all to drown out the echoes of truth that followed him. Tonight, those echoes had found him again, and I would not let him escape. You know what I remember most, Daniel? I said, my tone softer now, almost reflective. It wasn't the nights I went hungry so you could eat, though there were many. It wasn't even the endless hours I worked to keep a roof over our heads. No, what I remember most was the way you used to look at me, like I was your whole world, like you trusted me with every beat of your heart. That was before you learned to laugh at me, before you learned to hate me. His eyes snapped up, defensive, but something flickered there. Pain, maybe, or guilt. He covered it quickly with a sneer. I don't hate you. I just outgrew you. You wouldn't understand the world I live in now. You never would have made it where I am. I smiled faintly, though my chest ached. Perhaps. Or perhaps I chose not to step on others just to climb higher. There's more than one way to measure success. Spare me the lecture. He muttered, running a hand through his hair. You always do this. Twist everything so it sounds like you were the saint and I'm the villain. Maybe you can fool yourself, but not me. I don't need to fool you, Daniel. The truth has a way of speaking for itself. I leaned forward, my voice lower now, and the truth is, you built your fortune, your empire, on more than just hard work. Didn't you? His eyes narrowed, and this time, the mask cracked wider. He shifted uncomfortably, leaning back, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. What are you implying? I let the silence stretch again before answering. You think I don't know? But I do. I know about the deals, the shortcuts, the people you stepped over, the ones you promised to help only to abandon once you got what you wanted. I know, Daniel. I've always known. A muscle twitched in his cheek. You don't know anything, he said quickly, too quickly. I tilted my head, studying him the way one studies a chessboard before making the winning move. Don't I? Then why does the mention of it make you squirm? Why does it turn your laughter to silence? His hand slammed down on the table, rattling the silverware. A few heads turned our way again, but he didn't care. His composure was crumbling. You think you can sit here and judge me? You, the man who couldn't even keep his own life together. You don't know what it takes to survive out there, to win. I didn't flinch at his outburst. Instead, I met his fury with calm. You're right. I don't know what it takes to betray others. I don't know what it takes to build a life on arrogance and lies. But I do know what it costs. And Daniel, I paused, letting my words sink like stones into still water. The cost always comes due. For a moment, he said nothing. His chest heaved, his knuckles white against the table, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to crack. Then, almost imperceptibly, the fire in his eyes dimmed. Fear flickered there now, faint but undeniable. He leaned back slowly, his breath unsteady. You're bluffing. You're just an old man with stories. You don't have anything that can touch me. I smiled. A small, knowing smile that unsettled him more than any threat could have. If that's what you believe, Daniel, then why are you shaking? His hand dropped beneath the table, hidden, but I could see the tremor in his wrist. He looked away, pretending to glance at the door, at the people dining, anywhere but at me. His kingdom of certainty was trembling, brick by brick. You said I have nothing, I murmured, more to myself than to him. But tonight, I think you're beginning to see what nothing can become when it waits long enough. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. He wanted to laugh again, to dismiss me, but the sound never came. Instead, he reached for his wine and drank too quickly, as if drowning something bitter inside himself. And as I watched him, I knew with certainty my son's empire wasn't as unshakable as he wanted the world to believe. And I was the one who would remind him of every crack in its foundation. The waiter passed by again, refilling glasses, offering dessert menace neither of us cared to touch. Daniel waved him off with an impatient flick of his wrist, his eyes darting everywhere but me. He wanted to escape, to pull out his phone and vanish into some digital distraction, but he couldn't. Not tonight. He was trapped with me, with my silence, with the truths he had buried under years of arrogance. You think you can scare me with your riddles, he said finally, his voice low, biting. You're bluffing. You always bluffed. Empty promises, empty warnings. That's why I stopped listening to you years ago. I folded my hands on the table, calm, steady. If that's true, then why are you still here? Why not walk out that door, Daniel, and leave me to my emptiness? Why sit here, pretending you're not afraid of what I might say next? His nostrils flared. He hated it, being read, being stripped bare like that. For a man who built his life on power, on control, losing even an ounce of it was intolerable. Because I don't want to give you the satisfaction, he spat. I chuckled softly. Satisfaction? No, my son, I don't want satisfaction. I want you to remember. He frowned, confusion flickering across his face. Remember what? The night you came home trembling, I said, my voice low, steady, pulling from the shadows of memory. You were 22. Fresh from your first deal, the one that catapulted you forward. You told me you had finally won, that you'd proven yourself. But you were shaking, Daniel. Shaking because you knew what you did wasn't right. You had betrayed someone who trusted you. Do you remember? His eyes widened, just a fraction. He looked away quickly, but it was too late. I had seen the crack. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, gripping his glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Oh, I do. My tone sharpened, cutting through his denial. I remember the look on your face when you sat at our kitchen table. You drank water like a man dying of thirst, and you wouldn't meet my eyes. You thought I didn't notice. But I did. I saw it all. And I've seen it every day since. The way you cover that same fear with arrogance, with laughter, with cruelty. But underneath, it's still there, gnawing at you, isn't it? His breathing quickened, shallow and even. His eyes darted to mine, then away, then back again. The mask was slipping, and the boy beneath it was clawing to get out. You're twisting things. He snapped, though the edge of his voice was weaker now. You always twist things to make yourself look wise, like you're the puppet master pulling strings. But you're not. You never were. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper he couldn't ignore. And yet, here you are, unraveling because of a few simple words. That's the thing about truth, Daniel. It doesn't need strings. It pulls all on its own. He slammed his hand on the table again, but this time it wasn't fury. It was desperation. Stop it! His voice was louder than he meant it to be, drawing glances from nearby tables. A couple across the room whispered, their eyes lingering on him with curiosity and judgment. His face flushed, pride battling panic. Why? I asked softly. Does it hurt to be seen for what you are? To be reminded that the empire you built isn't made of stone but of glass, ready to shatter at the smallest tucks. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair, half standing ready to flee. But I reached across the table, not touching him, only letting my hand rest on the wood between us. My voice was calm, certain, unyielding. You can leave, Daniel. But you can't run from what you are. You can't outrun me. Because I am your shadow, the one you thought you'd buried with your laughter. And shadows don't fade, they only grow longer as the light burns brighter. He froze, half risen, his jaw tight. Slowly, he sat back down, his coat still clutched in his fist. He didn't look at me, not right away. Instead, he stared at the table, his breathing uneven, his face pale. Finally, in a voice that was no longer dripping with arrogance but heavy with something else. Fear, anger, maybe even sorrow. He said, "What do you want from me?" I leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I don't even want your gratitude. All I want, Daniel, is the truth. For once in your life, I want you to look me in the eye and admit who you really are. His head lifted slowly, his eyes meeting mine. There was no laughter left in them now. Only the trembling reflection of a man who was finally beginning to see himself clearly. And in that gaze, I knew I had cracked him wide open. The restaurant had grown quieter. Though perhaps it was just the silence between us that made everything else fade. The candlelight flickered lower, shadows stretching across Daniel's face, carving lines of tension I had never seen so deep before. He held my gaze, his jaw locked, as though admitting anything would shatter the empire he had spent years constructing. You don't know what you're asking, he said at last, his voice hoarse, stripped of its polished arrogance. I know exactly what I'm asking, I replied gently. For once in your life, stop hiding. Stop pretending you are untouchable. Look at me, Daniel. Look at your father and tell the truth. His lips trembled as he opened them, then closed again. His hands clenched against the table, his knuckles white. I could see the war raging inside him. The child who once trusted me battling the man who had long since buried that trust under greed and pride. I did what I had to. He muttered finally, his voice low, almost broken. I nodded slowly. Say it. Say what you did. His eyes darted around the room, desperate for escape, but every exit felt blocked by the weight of my stare. He took a shaky breath. His throat caught. He tried again. I betrayed people. People who believed in me. I lied, I cheated, I stepped on anyone who got in my way. I took everything because I couldn't stand having nothing. The confession spilled out like poison, bitter and corrosive. His voice cracked, and for a moment, he wasn't the powerful man in a suit, but the scared boy I once held in my arms. I let the silence absorb his words. Then I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. And now, Daniel, tell me this. Do you feel full, or do you feel empty? His eyes glistened. He tried to blink it away, but the truth burned through. Empty, he whispered. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The weight of his confession hung between us like heavy smoke. I reached for my glass, took a slow sip of water, and let him sit with it. He needed to. Finally, I spoke. You laughed at me tonight, said I had nothing. But you see now, don't you? Nothing is not what you think it is. Nothing is peace. Nothing is freedom from lies, from greed, from the constant hunger for more. You think you have everything, but it has left you emptier than I ever was. His head dropped into his hands, his shoulders trembling. He was breaking, piece by piece. The fortress he had built around himself crumbling into dust. And though part of me grieved for the boy he had lost, another part of me, one hardened by years of his disdain, knew this was necessary. He had to break before he could ever rebuild. You don't understand, he said, his voice muffled through his hands. If I stop now, if I admit what I've done, I'll lose everything. You've already lost yourself, I said quietly. And that is the greatest loss of all. He lifted his head slowly, his eyes wet, his face pale. He looked at me not with anger now, but with something far more painful, shame. Why are you doing this? Why tonight? Why now? I held his gaze, unflinching. Because tonight you laughed at me, Daniel. Tonight you looked at the man who gave you everything he could and spat on it as worthless. You needed to be reminded that worth is not measured in gold or glass towers. It is measured in truth. And the truth is, I may have nothing in your eyes, but I have everything you've lost. The words struck him harder than any blow could. He leaned back in his chair, defeated, his chest heaving with shallow breaths. For the first time in years, I saw him without the armor, without the arrogance. Just a man, broken and bare. The waiter approached cautiously with the bill, setting it down between us, unsure if he should linger. I nodded to him politely. Daniel didn't move. He just stared at the table, lost in the wreckage of his own making. I pulled out my wallet, slowly, deliberately, and placed cash on the bill. Daniel's eyes flicked up, confusion cutting through his despair. You're paying? He asked softly, almost incredulous. I gave a small smile. I always did, Daniel. Even when you never noticed. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. He sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on him. And for the first time in his life, my son had no laughter left to give. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the moment where the real reckoning began. We walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. The city buzzed with life. Cars honking, neon signs flickering, couples laughing as they strolled down the street. But between us, silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets, his steps brisk, his jaw clenched as if he were holding back 1,000 words. I let him walk a few paces ahead, watching the tension ripple through him. His shoulders hunched, his head dipped slightly. He looked smaller than he had at the dinner table, as though the weight of his confession had bent his back. For years he had strutted like a king, but tonight he walked like a man burdened by ghosts. Finally, he stopped under the dim glow of a streetlight, spinning to face me. His eyes were red, his face pale. Why now? He asked again, his voice raw. You've known for years, haven't you? You've known the kind of man I became. Why did you wait until tonight to tear me apart? I stepped closer, the streetlight casting long shadows across the pavement. Because tonight, you mocked me for having nothing. And that was the moment I realized. You truly believed it. You believed the lies you told yourself, that wealth made you greater and my sacrifices made me weak. I couldn't let you keep walking that path without seeing where it ends. He shook his head, his voice rising with desperation. You don't get it. If people find out what I've done, if investors, partners, the board, if they knew I'd lose everything, I'd be ruined. Ruined, I repeated softly. Or free. He stared at me, confused, anger flickering in his eyes. Free, you call disgrace freedom? Yes, I said firmly. Because chains made of gold are still chains, Daniel. You've been a prisoner of your empire, your lies, your hunger for more. And tonight, for the first time, you tasted what honesty feels like. That trembling in your chest, that weight in your throat, it isn't just shame, it's release. The truth is painful, but it sets you free from the endless game you've been playing. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening again. He turned away, staring at the city lights as though searching for an answer in their glow. You make it sound so simple, but it's not. I've built too much on lies. There's no coming back from that. I walked up beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He flinched at the touch, but didn't pull away. You can always come back. But it will cost you. It will take everything you think you are. And maybe that's what you fear most. Not losing your empire, but losing the mask you've worn for so long. His breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he might collapse under the weight of it all. He rubbed his face with both hands, his voice breaking. I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know where to start. I let out a slow breath, my heart aching for him despite the years of cruelty. Start with the truth, to yourself first, then to those you've wronged. Piece by piece you rebuild, not the empire, but yourself. He turned toward me, his eyes wide, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. And if I lose everything, I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Then you'll finally understand what nothing truly is. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see it isn't the curse you think, it's a gift. A clean slate. He looked away, blinking hard, his throat tightening with unspoken words. The silence stretched again, but it was different this time. Not hostile, not suffocating. It was the silence of a man standing at a crossroads, staring at the path he had avoided for too long. A car passed by, its headlights washing over us before fading into the distance. Daniel's face glowed pale in the aftermath, his features carved with conflict. At last, he whispered, "You always make it sound like you're the one in control. Like you've been waiting for this moment all along." I allowed myself a faint smile. "Not in control, Daniel. Just patient. I knew one day your laughter would turn hollow. And when it did, I'd be here to remind you of who you really are." He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me through new eyes. The sneer, the arrogance, the dismissive grin, they were gone. In their place was something fragile, something real. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly. "No," I agreed softly. "Not yet. Forgiveness is earned. But you can begin to deserve it." He nodded slowly, his chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. And in that dim streetlight, I saw the faintest spark of something I thought I'd lost forever in him: hope. The streets were thinning out as the night deepened, the city's noise softening into distant hums. Daniel and I stood there. Beneath the flickering streetlight, two shadows cast long on the pavement. For years we had been strangers divided by silence and pride. Now, the air between us carried the fragile weight of something I hadn't felt in a long time: a chance. Daniel's voice was low when he finally spoke again. "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I have the strength to face everything I've done." I studied him, the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. For once, he looked less like a titan of business and more like the son I once tucked into bed. "Strength isn't found in hiding, Daniel. It's found in standing still while the storm breaks over you. You've been running for so long. You don't even know what it feels like to stop. But stopping is the first step." He let out a shaky laugh, though there was no cruelty in it this time. "You make it sound like you've been carrying all the answers this whole time." I shook my head. "Not answers. Just scars. Scars teach you things victories never could." He fell quiet again, eyes tracing the cracks in the pavement as though they mirrored the fractures inside him. Then, softly, almost like a child, he asked, "Do you hate me?" The question pierced deeper than I expected. I took a breath, steadying myself. "No, Daniel, I could never hate you. I've been angry. I've been disappointed. But hate?" I shook my head. "Hate is a weight I chose not to carry. I carried enough already, raising you on my own." He winced at that, his shoulders sagging under the truth. "I treated you like nothing." "Yes," I said quietly, not sparing him. "You did. But I knew you weren't really laughing at me. You were laughing at yourself, at the fear of being what I was. Ordinary. You thought wealth would protect you from that. But it didn't. It only made the emptiness louder." His eyes filled, tears catching in the light. He looked away, ashamed. "I don't know how to face them. The people I hurt, the lives I stepped over. How do I start?" "One apology at a time," I answered. "One truth at a time. You can't rebuild an empire overnight, Daniel. But you can rebuild yourself, brick by brick. And this time, build it on honesty. On something real." His breath caught and his hand lifted slightly, as though he wanted to reach for me, but stopped short. I noticed the hesitation, the fear of rejection. So I closed the distance and placed my hand on his shoulder. His body tensed, then eased, the tremor in him subsiding just a little. "You're not alone in this," I said softly. "You never were. Even when you pushed me away, even when you mocked me, I never stopped being here. That's what fathers do. That's what love does." For a moment, the city seemed to vanish. No cars, no lights, no noise. Just a father and his son standing in the silence of a long overdue reckoning. Finally, Daniel let out a sob, quiet, broken, raw. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking, the dam of pride and anger finally breaking. And I let him. I let him crumble there beneath the streetlight, because sometimes falling apart is the only way to start anew. When he finally lowered his hands, his eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. He looked at me, voice trembling. "I don't deserve you." I gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe not. But you have me anyway. That's what family means." He nodded slowly, swallowing hard, and for the first time in years, his gaze softened when it met mine. No mockery, no arrogance. Just the fragile truth of a man stripped bare. We began walking again, side by side, the silence no longer heavy but strangely peaceful. He didn't speak, and I didn't push him to. Some truths didn't need words. Some were carried in the quiet steps between two people learning how to find their way back to each other. As we reached the corner where our paths would split, he stopped. His voice was hoarse but steady. Will you meet me again? Not for business, not for lectures. Just as father and son." My chest tightened, and I nodded. "Yes, Daniel. I've been waiting a long time to hear you ask that." He exhaled, a shaky breath of relief, and for the first time all evening, he smiled. Not the cold, mocking smile of a man above the world, but the gentle, uncertain smile of a son finding his way home. We parted there, under the quiet night sky. He walked away, his shoulders still heavy but no longer hunched in arrogance. And I watched him go, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with a cautious hope. He had laughed once, cruelly, saying I had nothing. But tonight, as I stood alone in the dark, I realized I had everything that mattered. I had the truth. I had my dignity. And, perhaps for the first time in years, I had my son back. Fragile, broken, but reaching for something real. And that, I thought, was worth more than all the riches in the world.